blessed to give than receive. As we prepare to celebrate President's Day, thank you for the great gift of leadership. May this wonderful ability to mobilize people toward a shared objective become the strength of our legislative branch. Help our lawmakers find the correct balance that leads to true influence. Lord, give them the wisdom to prefer listening to speaking and learning to teaching as they seek to make bipartisan progress. Infuse them with the serenity to accept the things they cannot change, the courage to change the things they can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We pray in your wonderful name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
They're implementing another work platform again.
Don't they have better ways to waste our time?
The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., February 13th, 2025. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Roger Marshall, a senator from the state of Kansas, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Chuck Grassley, President pro tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. of California to be Secretary.
Mr. President.
The Democratic leader.
Mr. President, this morning, the Senate will vote on the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy to serve as Secretary of Health and Human Services. By now, it's beyond clear that Mr. Kennedy is not remotely qualified to become the next Secretary of HHS. In fact, Mr. Kennedy might be one of the least qualified people that Donald Trump could have chosen for the job. There are so many others who would have been better. I'm very proud that every single Democrat will oppose Mr. Kennedy's nomination, because Democrats know better than to elevate a conspiracy theorist to the top health care job in the country. I know some of my colleagues feel the same way privately. In fact, if the Senate held a secret ballot today, I'll bet Mr. Kennedy would never come close to becoming confirmed, and that many, if not most, Republicans would vote against him. I think most likely most Republicans would vote against him if there were a secret ballot. But sadly and unfortunately
Who's
for
this evil
America,
piece of shit?
Republicans are being strong-armed by Donald Trump and will end up holding their nose and voting to confirm Mr. Kennedy. What a shame. What a travesty. I urge my Republican colleagues to think very carefully one last time before rolling the dice on Mr. Kennedy. A vote to confirm Mr. Kennedy is a vote to make America sicker. Mr. Kennedy has made a living not by promoting public health, but by actively fighting it. Mr. Kennedy is the face of the modern anti-vaccine movement. Mr. Kennedy has spent decades profiting off vaccine misinformation. Mr. Kennedy told me to my face that he would, quote, defer to the president on issues as personal, as deeply held, as important as abortion.
Mr. Kennedy.
Well, how do we know that Mr. Kennedy won't just defer to the president, who is far from an expert on health care, on other issues and health care issues as well? It's simple. We don't. But if he can change his view and defer to the president on something as deeply held as abortion, the likelihood is he'll change his view on many other health care issues to the detriment of the American people. One thing he won't change his views on is vaccines, I am sure, because he's held that so deeply. My Republican colleagues should think very carefully before voting to elevate a vaccine skeptic, a conspiracy theorist, to oversee our health care system. If confirmed, I fear greatly that Mr. Kennedy will take steps that severely undermine public health, weaken safety standards, and put the needs of for-profit corporations ahead of the needs of American families. And sooner or later, public backlash is going to build, and Republicans will have wished they hadn't signed their names for such a troubled nominee. So one final time, I implore my Republican colleagues to reject the nomination of Kennedy to be Secretary of HHS. A vote to confirm Mr. Kennedy is a vote I truly believe many, many Republicans and most Americans will eventually very deeply regret. Now on costs, lowering costs for average families in the budget resolution. Well, my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, welcome to the age of Trumpflation. Trumpflation. If there was, remember on the campaign trail, he said, quote, "When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one." Starting on day one, he said he will bring prices down. Well, today is day 25, and inflation is not down, but actually up by 3%. higher than what economists were expecting. At the grocery store, the price of pork and chicken and beef are all up. Eggs are up 15% from last month. Gas prices are up 2% from last month. Used cars are up. Auto insurance has become more expensive. And what is Donald Trump doing about all this? He's making the problem worse by threatening trade wars with our own allies. Here's what the CEO of Ford Motor Company said yesterday. The CEO of Ford Motor Company warned yesterday that, quote, a 25% tariff across the Mexico and Canadian borders will blow a hole in the U.S. industry that we have never seen. That's the head of Ford Motor. That's not some liberal Democratic economist. The head of Ford Motor says that the tariffs will blow a huge hole in the U.S. auto industry. What he's doing on tariffs is, again, sort of like everything else. It's sort of a meat axe approach, a slash and burn approach, not looking at each individual case and seeing what's good and what's bad. Inflation is the #1 issue on people's minds. It was the biggest issue during the election, and already Donald Trump is breaking his promise to do something about it. And the American people are starting to take notice already, even though we're only on day 25 of Trump's term. A recent CBS poll showed that 66% of voters do not think Trump is focused enough on lowering prices. 66% of voters do not think Donald Trump is focused enough on lowering prices. And you know what? They're absolutely right. In the 3 weeks that Donald Trump has been president, he's been focused on pretty much everything but fighting inflation, which is the #1 thing people care about. We've seen this maneuver so many times before from Donald Trump. He knows that he has no real answers to fixing inflation. So what does he do? He distracts, he distorts, he says ridiculous and wild, strange things, hoping to distract the country from the fact he's not doing his job. It's why he talks about things like renaming the Gulf of Mexico. It's why he's talking about hotels in Gaza. It's why he's talking about annexing Canada. None of these things have anything to do with the thing that matters most, lowering the cost of living for average American families. And meanwhile, what are the Republicans doing here in Congress? What are my Senate Republican colleagues doing? Are they fighting inflation? Maybe? No way. No way. Republicans are full steam ahead with cutting taxes for the ultra-rich, paid for on the backs of working and middle-class families. Just look at the gargoyle-like budget proposal that the House Republicans released yesterday. Republicans want to make billionaires even wealthier by raising costs for working people. The Republican budget slashes nutrition programs that help 40 million Americans put food on the table. The Republican budget proposes massive cuts to Medicaid, threatening health care for tens of millions of people. It will make food, health care, energy, and housing more expensive, all to cut taxes for the ultra-rich, hurting the middle class, raising costs for the middle class to help the ultra-wealthy. The Republican budget plan can be described in one word: radical. Republicans should remember well what happened the last time they cut taxes for the ultra-wealthy. It backfired with the rest of America. If Republicans try to cut taxes for the ultra-rich again, history is going to repeat itself, and it will cost them dearly at the ballot box. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
We've got passion, we've got determination. And if we set our sights on something, you better believe it's happening.
We always felt like our content was all about entertainment and being fun, but there was also this, sort of professional business side. One of the things that we knew was basically essential was getting our own website, so people would actually see a proper official group who mean business and who can deliver. And we always had this vision of bringing things into existence that previously had never been seen.
This is the world's largest act.
We bounced a plane, a boat and a car, and it was wild. So today, How Ridiculous have 50 million followers.
We're in the billions of views.
Tens of billions.
That's pretty good.
I don't know all the things that we're going to get to do in the next year or 5 years, but if we can do...
Mr. President,
The senator from Arkansas.
I ask that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that our intern on the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, Kylie Henneberry, be granted floor privileges through May 9th, 2025, and that CFTC detailee Kevin Webb also be granted floor privileges through the end of the 119th Congress.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm honored to speak on the floor of the Senate and support Brooke Rollins to be Secretary of Agriculture. The Senate will vote on her nomination to this cabinet position today, and I encourage my colleagues to vote yes. America's farmers, ranchers, foresters need a leader at USDA who will be an advocate for their livelihoods in rural America and be a strong voice to address the pressing needs of our agricultural community. Brooke Rollins is that person. In her hearing before the Senate Agriculture Committee, she pledged to do everything within her ability to ensure that our farmers, ranchers, and rural communities thrive. And we know she will follow through on that because rural America helped shape her into what she is today. She's leading a life of service that began with membership in her small-town Texas FFA chapter and continues to credit her FFA advisor for his support and mentorship in her agricultural career. She invited him to attend the nomination hearing before the Senate Agriculture Committee last month, along with the Texas State FFA officer team she served with in high school. Texas Governor Rick Perry knew Brooke Rollins had a heart for Texas farmers and invited her to join his policy team where she advocated for agriculture. She continues that passion today. Her executive leadership during the first Trump administration to serve in this position and advocate for family farms. She understands the significant responsibility of this role during one of the most economically challenging times for agriculture producers. Hardworking farmers who grow our food are struggling to operate, let alone make a profit in this current economic climate. High inflation and steep input costs far outpacing depressed market prices have put many farm families on a course towards bankruptcy, with multi-generational operations fighting to continue their family legacy. In December, Congress approved natural disaster and emergency assistance to help producers obtain critical operating loans for this crop year. Ensuring delivery of this aid will be one of her first priorities as Secretary. I'm confident she will pursue policies to help rural American live up to its potential. While we first met during the first Trump administration, I've had the opportunity to get to know her better during her confirmation process, and she has demonstrated her enthusiasm for being a voice for small-town American and agriculture producers. I'm grateful she is willing to take on this big responsibility and willing to be part of the solution to help rural America at this time of unprecedented challenges. As chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, I've met with farmers, ranchers and agricultural stakeholders from all over the country, and they have been sounding the alarm of the dire circumstances they face in producing a safe, affordable, and abundant supply of food. Farmers from my home state of Arkansas shared with the committee last week about the difficult conversations they are forced to have right now about continuing their multi-generational farms and risking their family's future in the industry. Unfortunately, this is a conversation many more farm families across the country will have if we do not act quickly. Congress must deliver an updated 5-year farm bill that modernizes the safety net in order to minimize the liabilities farm families take on when they plant their crops. Food security is national security. Our country is blessed to have grocery stores stocked with food to put on our tables. This is the result of the hard work of our farmers and ranchers. These producers need the tools to be successful and continue to grow the food, fiber, and fuel our nation depends on. I know Brooke Rollins shares my commitment to enhancing the policies that help farm families and rural communities thrive. Given her executive leadership, she is well prepared to hit the ground running, and she walks through the doors of USDA's secretary and deliver the certainty and predictability our producers need. I look forward to working with her to strengthen rural America and the men, women, and families who call it home. I also want to thank everyone on both sides of the aisle in making it such that we could do this in such a expeditious way. It took a lot of cooperation. I think it just shows how important our farmers are to both Democrats and Republicans. It's one of the few areas that's not a partisan issue. It's all about helping the men and women that work so very hard to provide the food that we need. So with that, I yield back.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, anybody who knows me well knows that I say this a lot, and that is that agriculture is the lifeblood of South Dakota and the lifeblood of our country. And farmers and ranchers are hard at work every single day to feed America and the world. But what I hear lately from farmers and ranchers is not good. Agricultural producers across the country have faced strong headwinds in recent years. Higher input costs, high interest rates, lower commodity prices, all leading to declining farm income year after year. Natural disasters have struck many of our farm regions, and the bird flu continues to ravage agriculture across the country. Of course, the last few years, the Biden administration was hardly much help. It imposed burdensome regulations like waters of the United States that threatened to devastate the farm sector. The administration put expanding market access on the back burner while our agricultural trade deficit grew to record levels. And their profligate spending led to inflation that hit farmers and ranchers especially hard in the form of higher input costs. Meanwhile, Democrats here in Congress failed to prioritize a modernized farm bill to support agriculture through these challenges. And we are now more than a year past due for an updated farm bill. Mr. President, American farmers and ranchers deserve better, much better. And I expect things will be different under President Trump. I know that farmers and ranchers will have a friend in Brooke Rollins, the President's choice for Secretary of Agriculture. Mrs. Rollins grew up in the small agricultural town of Glen Rose, Texas. She spent summers working for her family on their farm in Minnesota, helping with their corn, potato, and soybean crops. She was a 4-H'er, an FFA state officer, and a barrel racer. And her 4 kids are keeping up the family's way of life, showing cattle in Texas. After studying agriculture development at Texas A&M, Mrs. Rollins went to work for then Governor Rick Perry, where she worked on agricultural policy. She then continued her ag work by building up a Texas think tank empowering the voices of farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. Then she served in President Trump's first administration, first leading the Office of American Innovation, and then the Domestic Policy Council. Mr. President, Brooke Rollins is a policy wonk with a farmer's heart. She understands the needs of agriculture producers, and she knows how to deliver results. And she promises to get right to work after she is confirmed on 4 key priorities. First, getting disaster and economic aid out the door and into the hands of farmers. Second, getting the bird flu and other animal disease outbreaks under control. Third,